For the opening keynote, I have the pleasure of introducing Andrew Moore as our speaker. Andrew is the head of Google Cloud, AI, and industry solutions, where he empowers teams to unlock the value of AI. Prior to this, he was the dean and professor of computer science at CMU, where he contributed to its world renowned research, its innovative and entrepreneurial culture, and helped to expand CMU interactions with industry and government. His work at Google and his talk today will focus on applying leadership mindset for enabling AI-led business transformation. This talk will be moderated by Renu Bhatia, a VP at NVIDIA, who is a transformational leader herself and is responsible for scaling cutting-edge business at NVIDIA and previously at Marvell. She has been awarded the Top 100 Women of Influence Award from Silicon Valley Business and the Twin Award from YWCA. So please join me in welcoming both Andrew Moore and Renu Bhatia.
Thank you, Ritti, for that wonderful introduction. It is a pleasure to be here at TiE. It's super exciting to be here with you, Andrew. I'm really looking forward to the session.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I've been looking forward to this too.
When I first met you, it was at NVIDIA GTC conference in Washington, D.C. And I was just reflecting on that conversation. We had a great dialogue. You were just transitioning from Carnegie Mellon to Google. And you've had an incredible career. You've been in academia, you've been in industry. And as you've seen at innovations across your career, what do you believe are the biggest themes and opportunities for AI from now until 2025?
Very good, thank you. Yes, I've been really lucky because I've had the opportunity to work with what I believe are some of the most important long-term thinkers in artificial intelligence, robotics, human speech understanding, and so forth. And at Google, where we've got this team of people devoted to making this stuff real. This year, of course, has been a very difficult year for the world. But in many ways, it has been caused us to really push hard on many aspects of the AI dream and pull in perhaps a year or two some of the big themes in the development of AI and AI platforms. And probably the biggest overall theme that we've seen this year, and we're going to see, I think, going crazy up until the point of 2025, is around personalized help and advice. So what's going on is there is so much that will be in theory possible to help people who are nervous, anxious, or excited. And nervous might be people who need information about what's happening with vaccinations, whether they're going to be able to ever order a particular part for their computer. Excited are people who perhaps are finally getting an opportunity to go somewhere interesting in the world and do something fun with friends they haven't seen for a while, and they're going to want to know what's possible, what can they do, what activities are available, what's safe. And this same questions come up in healthcare, in retail, and financial services, and we, in theory, could be in a world where customers of companies providing all these kinds of services can really give specialized concierge services to be able to answer questions and give help and make things happen for these customers. And so what we've seen, because we had to deal with this by necessity for things like throughout the world, folks giving aid to small businesses or registration for unemployment benefits or all of these things, we had to quickly put in pretty smart autonomous systems for answering questions because there simply weren't enough human beings available to answer those. And if you've got a medical condition and you're waiting 4 hours on the phone to speak to someone, that's awful, especially if your question is something which AIs can help with.
Absolutely.
So this has been the big theme of 2020, is accelerating all these bits of AI technology which are not just generic AI learning patterns, those kinds of things, but are specifically, you still use machine learning, but you're using it to learn how to answer the most useful question that a human is asking, whether that's a retail search, someone going onto a retail website doing traditional text search, or a human asking for help from a call center, or for a physician who really needs to quickly get a summary of what's going on with their patients right now.
Yeah, that was so insightful. Completely agree. Coming out of the pandemic, healthcare is the #1 priority in saving lives, and business transformation has, the velocity of that has increased and thrust us forward in a big way. I hope that the audience will gain a lot of value out of all the guidance you've given here, and they will be able to capitalize on some of these opportunities as well. As you know, and we've realized through this turbulent 2020 that saving lives and making a difference in the world is super important for everyone. And also for businesses, it's important to make money. To that end, I have been reading a little bit about your cloud AI adoption framework, this white paper. And it was mentioned in there that industry-specific solutions, when provided by businesses, it will double their cash flow by 2030 if they're able to do that and fully absorb and implement AI. How do you advise these businesses to maximize their ROI?
So there's one anti-pattern and one good pattern. The anti-pattern, which I really want to push back against, though understanding, of course, that everyone's in a different circumstance, is to say, let's create an AI center of excellence or expertise and run that kind of on the side next to the rest of the company, so that we've got a few people who can be thinking about AI and how it might apply in the future. That is something which I've seen governments try to do, nonprofits and companies. And the thing is, the people you put in that AI center of excellence will be miserable unless they are absolutely connected to what's actually important to the CEO of the business. So the anti-pattern then is to take AI as this just lump of technology and say, let's have part of our company doing AI and see what happens. The pro-pattern is sort of going back to the points you just made. It's all about figuring out the customer user journey, the actual thing that the customers of this company really need to make them less anxious, to make them more excited, or to make them less nervous, and figure out what, in theory, would you like to do. Don't worry too much about what the artificial intelligence you think is capable of or not capable of. Figure out what that customer experience is. Then, once you've got buy-in and the CEO or some very senior executive who can run change management is bought into, yes, if we can do this, it will be a game changer for us. Then you let people like me in, the technologists who can tell you how and whether to make it possible, how to enable it, what are the big risks of a potential ethics problem or human rights impact, or the technology sounds like it's ready, but it's not ready. That comes afterwards. But it's got to begin with the customer user journey and ask your question, what will my competitors and myself be like if some of us are providing this experience where the customers feel like they've got a concierge who really cares about them, versus my business perhaps still remains as, yeah, you've got to remember your password, log into the site, navigate to the right part, know the rules, and then sort of click a button and then wait for 3 days while a customer support person gets back to you, right? That will differentiate. Some companies will grow a slice of the pie, some companies will shrink. And it's really based on that customer user journey.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And I think you touched on change management and make sure there is a sponsor and the CEO is sponsoring the change. I think those were really interesting points that you made there. And it helps me transition to the next conversation that I want to have. You have so much experience with enterprises and across the board. What do you believe are the typical challenges that enterprises are facing in implementing AI?
So one thing which is really important is the general topic of fairness and safety. So there actually are things to trip up on where even the most well-principled and well-intentioned company can inadvertently find themselves suddenly in the middle of a hornet's nest of complexity. So as one starts up a project, if there's even almost in any area, if it's a major project and the company is making a big bet on it, it is worth bringing in experts to do things like a human rights impact assessment. So I'm now going to give you a piece of advice I've been giving occasionally to folks who ask me about the following topic. A great example of what I'm talking about is threats or monitoring automatic feeds for people making threatening statements. Because there's this big desire, of course, that if someone makes a threatening statement, you can have an automated system check it, and then a person can investigate in case there's a problem. This is, in general, a really good topic, but it's also very dangerous in the sense that if your AI is even slightly off, it could end up inadvertently singling out a specific group or people with a specific vocabulary or something like that. And you can suddenly find yourself perpetuating some societal problems. Another example is human sentiment detection from voice. So there have been huge breakthroughs in the academic world, many of them coming from Carnegie Mellon, I should mention, on looking at sonograms of voices, and based on the fact that when people are stressed, there's more blood flowing to other parts of the body, they get more breathless, and you can measure stress in voices really well. Fortunately or unfortunately, you can measure many other things. It seems to be the case that it's possible to get early signs of certain degenerative diseases, for example. So it's exciting, right? But I don't want to see a company charging in there saying, all right, I'm going to find out if my customers are happy by like using some technology to investigate whether they're stressed out in this way, without really thinking through all the consequences of that, and whether, for example, 4 months later, there will be a huge news article about how AIs are reading your mind or something like that. Yes. So I cannot emphasize enough, there really are dangers here. And in fact, the dangers where companies and the public are aligned. No one wants to do these things, but if you're not careful, you don't think about it in advance, you can easily jump into these hornet's nests.
Well, that's super interesting. Wow. Yeah, something to avoid. We don't want to do the sentiment analysis of all these employees and then end up in a really damaging position. So that was super interesting. I was going to ask you, are there any businesses that you believe are succeeding in implementing AI well and have raised the bar for others? Are there any businesses or examples you want to share?
Yes, I can't talk about my own customers in Google Cloud, but I want to give you some examples of the patterns which are successful. So for an AI project to work all the way from someone realizing that there's a customer user journey that could be fulfilled to that actually being a successful product, and 3 months later there's no big public explosion because of some fairness problem, along that whole journey, there are some bits of discipline which is important to have. And one example was we needed to get out an emergency COVID prediction algorithm. So this was actually a team within Google who needed to, with urgency, predict like 7 days out, 14 days out, 21 days out, COVID cases, deaths, other things like that, at a very high granularity, at the level of counties in the United States and equivalent areas around the world. And this was a project which, frankly, if you'd asked me about it in 2019, I'd say it was about a 2-year project to get all of this going. This team managed to build something which was had unprecedented accuracy within 3 months. And the secret,
Amazing.
the secret was having a stable platform that everyone worked on. So to be really specific, for a project like this, in the old days, even in Google, we would begin with a bunch of scientists, data scientists, and in this case, epidemiologists, working on models, finding out a proof of concept of a model which could be accurate. Then we would have said, this works. Let's now start the project to get this into production. Now, the initial models would have been built using a set of really fun and interesting data modeling tools, statistical tools, and so forth. But by the time you're getting into production, where you're dealing with very secure data, things where you have to worry about the regional sovereignty of data, customer managed encryption keys, reliability, the fact that if a data center goes down, it's got to be multi-home so another data center can take it over. You've got a whole set of other problems. And so you see a data science project which begins with this proof of concept, then goes through planning to turn it into something which can be deployed, then another set of engineering to deploy it, followed by maintenance. So what we've done with our platform is take that very first stage and have a sort of internal contract that if you use this platform to do your exploration, it's a procedural, as in not a whole new rebuilding of everything, to then take it to production. So that you use a stable platform like Cloud AI's AI platform. Do the developer, let your geniuses do what they want. When they sort of breathe a sigh of relief, they've been productive and they've got something. At that point, the next few steps are procedural in the sense that there already is a way to say, all right, this piece of inference, make sure it's running in a set of data centers which are replicated but have the following data security and locality requirements and so forth.
Well, it's so interesting to hear that you were able to compress that from 2 years to 3 months. And that's crucial when you're fighting a pandemic and bringing that transparency and that knowledge for public health reasons. So that was an excellent example. Thank you for sharing that. It makes us think that, hey, you have to think about the data science project, but also think about data science stage, but also think about the implementation and planning and the deployment and how it's going to be deployed in the multiple data centers across the globe. So that was interesting that you need to think
exactly.
about all the stages.
You don't want to add one extra little addendum to that, which was the whole thing took about 14 weeks. 2 weeks were entirely about making sure that, going back to this fairness thing, making sure that we weren't making some of the innocent statistical mistakes that have been made in epidemiology for years, where the model perhaps focuses on or predicts worse for a particular underrepresented group, or questions like that. So again, that is usually a massive undertaking, but the kind of explainability tools and especially something called equality of opportunity testing to find out, having those available in the same pipeline enables us to move very quickly to run a barrage of those tests before we release this. And that was a very tense time because
I imagine, yeah.
There was this feeling of, well, it probably works and it's important, let's get it out. But there was another feeling of, but let's not propagate and perpetuate many other kinds of problems that have happened in the past. And so it was a relief that we had tools for doing quick explanations to make sure that we could defend these algorithms when they went out.
Wow, that must have been a relief there. So this ML and AI journey, as you are aware, Andrew, is daunting for most. So I was going to ask you, what is the best place for businesses to start?
It really depends on the business, and there are plenty of industries which are incredibly important to the nation and the world, which really have not had the opportunity to hire these kind of expensive data scientists types of folks around. My advice for them is slightly different from my advice from, say, a digital native, a company which has grown up providing services online all along. So for that first kind, you need to make sure that you've got experience running one or two automation projects or AI projects. It's okay if you go to an integrator or one of the internet giants or someone to build it, but make sure that you use this as a chance for your company to experience what it's like to run one of these AI projects and get that expertise so that you get that first one, and then you start to build up that strength where the C-level team and leaders throughout the company start to look at each other and get the know-how as to how things go right and wrong during these things. So even at the level of huge things like United States national security, it's the same thing. You've got to get practice running one of these projects. If you don't have the people yourself, then start getting practice at hiring other folks to do it and learn from them. If you do, still practice putting those people to good use and empowering them so that they're able to actually get stuff done.
Oh, thanks. That's great insight there. There's a lot of investors and startups in our audience today. Hopefully they're benefiting from this conversation. What guidance can you share with them in terms of what they could do to seize on opportunities that AI offers?
Really good question. And if you are one of those investors or involved, you're in a really good place right now. This is the time. This is not like the 1990s or the 2000s when folks like me were really excited but frustrated because we couldn't get stuff out there. Now there are the huge data management tools, including huge secure data management tools, which means that you can build data-based businesses. So one mistake I've seen are folks trying to go too wide too quickly. So there are hundreds of industrial solutions using AI sitting there waiting to be created, which have got annual run rates for their business in the 10 and 11 figures. Places like Google, strong though we are, or the other huge internet giants, they're not going to be able to cover all of these. So pick an area and go focus in on a tiny segment, like 1% or 0.1% of the overall business world, and do really well there. And what we're definitely seeing happening is that sorry, I have a cat in front of me. There need to be this kind of level of specificity.
Well, I think that was great because your example, like there's a lot of scope in industrials, that's a huge market, but you figure out what problem you're solving and keep it narrow and focused. And build industry-specific vertical solutions that are focused. Did I miss anything on that?
I think you got it really well. The other thing is, if a CEO says, I want my company to do AI, that CEO has a responsibility. They have to support the people who are going to do these projects, because there's no such thing as a grand automation project which doesn't have big change management. And a technologist sitting in an AI department is not going to be able to change the way the company operates. They have to have very strong executive sponsorship from the very top, because when the technology works, you will need to change the operations. And if you don't, then it's been pointless in the first place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the leadership who needs to change their mindset as well and drive that through the entire organization. We've had a lovely chat here. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Anything we missed in this conversation, any parts you would like to add to We're all
No,
to
you,
learn. I'm sure
you've,
everybody.
you've done a great job of covering all the things which I'm really passionate about right now. So I'm very grateful for that.
I have to tell you one area that I haven't covered is, what is the name of your kitty? She's also a participant. She's participating in this call now.
The name is Scout. We have two cats called Pilot and Scout, named by my son when he was about 5 years old.
Oh, very, very cute. Okay, thank you. I also want to check and see if our audience have posted any questions that we can answer.
Yeah, nothing right now.
Okay, all right. Lola, keep us posted if there is a question.
Sure. I think one general question that just came up is regarding data that you need for training models, right? So anything you can touch on that quickly?
Yes, it's a really important question. There are plenty of areas where it's not possible, or it looks like the lack of data might slow you down. There is good news there. So I was much more worried about this 18 months ago than I am now. It's still an issue, but with the large things like computer vision or natural language processing models that we've been able to build, these are very large models which allow things called transfer learning, where these big models are being trained on, at the very least, billions. I'm not quite sure if I'm allowed to say just how many, but vast numbers of bits of data from everywhere. And so they've been able to build the basic fundamentals, which means that when you then try to specialize them to a particular domain, under some circumstances, so I'm not promising things for all circumstances, we can now learn to predict things that need to be predicted based on dozens of labeled objects, rather than 18 months ago, I'd have said, nope, you need to give me 100,000 labeled objects before I can build your machine learning system. So this notion of one-shot or low-shot learning has been a real game changer. Second thing is there's such a need, especially in computer vision, for huge numbers of examples of imagery that represent the full range of possible environments. For example, if you're training an automated helicopter, which is using some computer vision for some of its navigation, you cannot possibly gather all the training data you need. You need to simulate dusty conditions, rainy, dusty conditions with the sun in a particular position. That situation where 2 of your 5 sensors have failed. To do that, you need simulation. And so we're seeing a huge growth in the industry of simulating visual and video feeds in order to then train models on them. That was a great question, by the way.
Well, hopefully that answered that question for you.
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I believe there is a lot of great work going on at Google and at NVIDIA, providing AI solutions to solve the world's problems and make a big difference. It was a pleasure having you here, and I really enjoyed the insights you've shared with the audience. I hope everybody enjoyed the session as much as I did, and want to thank you for joining us here at TiEcon, and thanks to the TiEcon team as well.
It's 12:30. Thank you very much. I totally enjoyed this session, and I really appreciate the passion of everyone at TiEcon. We technologists have a responsibility to repair the world, and I think we can do it.
Thank you so much.
This awful pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think we have learned a huge amount, and there is big developments on stuff to support the heroes who are doing contact tracing at the starts of these pandemics, and being able to, depending on the specific kind of disease, do this, I can't remember what the right word is, the circle approach, where you manage the pandemic by identifying early victims and making sure that you're giving treatment and care and appropriate levels of separation for folks they've been in contact with. So getting that right, I think, is really important. There's a technology which many of you may have heard of called federated learning, which is growing rapidly. This is a form of machine learning where you use huge amounts of data, but it's all very carefully anonymized in a cryptographic way so that no one can infer the actual personal data that's involved. But with federated learning, you can search for hotspots or areas where there's something mysterious going on. Work that I used to be involved with many years ago looked for an increase in the sales of over-the-counter pharmaceutical things for flu-like symptoms. Look for an increase in that in a city that's in a stripe across the city. It turns out that if there's been an airborne release, either accidental industrial release or an actual terrorist release, then you will see a stripe of people affected. So you can have algorithms looking for these kinds of patterns. And unfortunately, there are dozens of forms of pathogens and infectious diseases out there. So you have to have a set of these. But this is a place where I think all of us technologists can really help.
Well, thanks. Thanks for talking about federated learning. And I think this was really appropriate given what's going on in the world and specifically in India. I think we should be wrapping up. We've gone a few minutes over. So I want to thank you again, Andrew, for sharing your insights and appreciate the audience who made it this morning. Thank you so much for being part of this session. Thank you, Lalit and Dipti and the TiEcon team too.